Hello everyone, this is Darion on GNB here, and today we're going to be taking a look at James Gunn's Creature Commandos. Creature Commandos released in December of 2024. The series centers around Amanda Waller, who, after her Suicide Squad outings got exposed by her daughter in Peacemaker Season 1, has opted to use monsters as her new little loophole. The Creature Commandos, alongside Rick Flag Sr., the father of Rick Flag Jr., have a mission to protect the princess of the nation of Pakolistan from the likes of Cersei and her sons of Themyscira. But they would eventually find out there's more to the princess than meets the eye. Yeah, I can say the start of a new universe, but I feel like it's more accurate to just call it DCEU leftovers. For a brief bit of backstory that I think is pretty necessary, James Gunn, who made a name for himself with the Guardians of the Galaxy films over at Marvel Studios, got exposed for some pretty fucked up tweets he made back in the day. He was subsequently fired, in which Warner Bros. DC brought him on to direct a project of his own choosing, The Suicide Squad, which would in turn lead to the Peacemaker spinoff. And after returning to Marvel Studios to direct his final Guardians film, sometime after, he was put as one of the heads of the new DC Studios, which would start a whole new DCU. I call it DCEU leftovers because this is one of those projects that kind of got reworked to fit into the new universe, as Gunn was writing this before he became head of the DCU. The official start of the DCU begins with James Gunn's Superman, which will be out in the next few months. But this, along with stuff like the Suicide Squad, Peacemaker Season 1, the Blue Beetle movie, etc., can I guess be seen as more of a prologue of sorts to the new universe? Anyway, enough with all that. Creature Commandos is fine. It's alright. I made a short a while ago after episode 3 dropped, and I mentioned how this might be Gunn's weakest project, and after finishing the season, I still very much think that. Though, given the dude's track record, his worst comic book project doesn't necessarily mean bad, but just decent at best. The story is honestly surprisingly weak. Nothing about the ongoing narrative really kept me all that interested, especially compared to Gunn's previous works. This is one of those projects where I kind of struggled to give an accurate summary for a bit, because the whole Protect the Princess thing only takes up about 3 episodes, before switching gears and having it reveal Princess Ilana will eventually cause World War III, and dozens of the world heroes to be killed off. And shockingly, nothing surrounding this really got me all that invested. I feel like a part of the reason is because they don't do a good job of cluing you in as to how she's able to even do all this shit. Like, what force or allies did she come across to where she can do all this? Let alone be able to kill the likes of the Justice League and even goddamn Superman. Like, it really relies on how believable it is that she could pull something like this off, but the show never really gives us anything. That and Ilana just isn't that good of a villain. I might be getting a bit ahead of myself when bringing this up, but they try to do some quasi-triple twist bullshit where Cersei reveals she's trying to save the world before Ilana can destroy it, to then revealing that the doctor that backs up Cersei's claims is actually Clayface in disguise, and a ploy to get the Creature Commandos to actually go and kill the princess for whatever reason. To then at the end reveal that no, Ilana actually is evil as shit, and Clayface was only added to the equation to throw Cersei's words into question. And I don't know, it just feels so unnecessarily convoluted. Like, you didn't need to go and have this big third surprise twist. You really could have just had the first twist and lean into Ilana being evil and shit, and it would have been fine. The writing for this series is also kinda weird. Gunn has really made a name for himself for being able to balance fun, wacky, stupid humor with really good, heartfelt, serious, and dramatic storytelling very well. But I think this is the one project where that doesn't really land the best. The humor in this show is probably the most hit or miss compared to Gunn's previous works. None of the stuff is bad, I don't think. A lot of the stuff with Eric Frankenstein was really fun. And we have good bits with the Bride, Phosphorus, and Waller here and there. But as a whole, this really wasn't as ha-ha funny as the Guardians, the Suicide Squad, or Peacemaker projects in my opinion. And the dramatic, heartfelt story was fine. Like, yeah, it was serviceable, and he definitely did a good job at making me feel for these characters, but nothing really landed as well as it could have in my opinion. Also, the way the show chooses to dive in and explore certain characters is just a bit odd to me. The format of the show is that with each episode, while we're currently on a mission with the Commandos, we'll periodically flash back detailing their origins and how they ended up where they were. And this is a solid format, but it's also pretty awkwardly executed. Because A, I don't know if this goes for anyone else, but at least to me, it kind of makes the ongoing plot not feel as interesting in my opinion. Like, every once in a while, we'll get pulled out and see the origins of certain characters, and to me it just makes the ongoing plot not seem like that much of importance by comparison. It makes things feel a little too unfocused for me. I think the episode to best handle this is the finale, and even then I think it could have been better. But I'll get into that a bit later. And B, by the time we get the full picture to a lot of these guys' stories, they really just end with not enough proper screen time or build up to just allow for more of a connection to be drawn from the audience. Like, you'll get an episode to focus on a character who didn't get much focus before then, and their story will end right after we learn their deep backstory, with the season as a whole not really putting much focus on them beforehand. And it just feels super off to me. For what it is, it works fine, I think, but I think we could have benefited from maybe 2 or 3 additional episodes to kind of space these things out and give proper time to a lot of these guys before things get wrapped up. The season also ends in a bit of an awkward place as well. In the finale, there's a big deal made about the Commandos killing the princess, who would appear to be innocent, for the moment at least, and it had obviously caused conflict with the nation of Pekolistan. But when the bride pieces together her whole evil plan, she kills her anyway. But the show never gives us any kind of aftermath to that decision. Like, what did they do when they found out their fucking princess was dead? Is it going to cause them to retaliate against the US in some capacity? We don't fucking know, because the show didn't bother to dive into any of that stuff. If there is something I really do dig about the show, it is the world building. I remember back when the Suicide Squad dropped, I was talking to a friend of mine about how I like with Gunn's projects, it gives us a bit of a brief glimpse at how large the DC universe is with all these different characters, with different relationships with other heroes and such, and it's nice to see that kind of thing carry over with the DCU. I like how this is a pre-established universe we're just now stepping into, with a bunch of heroes and villains already up and about. Stuff like Metropolis, Star City, Gotham, and Bloodhaven were just casually mentioned and even featured, which is kind of cool. Metahumans as well are just a common occurrence in this world, with it not being too surprising when 1 or 2 pop up randomly, which I find to be pretty neat. It's pretty cool, and I can't wait to see the different ways some of these things are utilized in the future. Now I guess it's time to talk characters. The character writing in this show is pretty solid. Gunn typically has a good handle on characters, specifically the whole wayward, misunderstood misfits kind of thing. It kind of disappointed me a little to see this team would kind of just be another Suicide Squad. I would have preferred something a bit more original, especially as seeing the Creature Commandos in the comics are a really clever take on the old Universal Monster thing, but that's besides the point. You'd think it'd be as fun with these mix-up of personalities compared to Gunn's Suicide Squad and Peacemaker, but it kinda isn't. Despite these characters all being cool and fun in their own right, I don't think anything here hits the same stride as Gunn's other works. I'm sorry if I keep bringing those up, it's just the man has done significantly better, and that's what I'm trying to pull from. People harp on Gunn for doing similar stuff with his projects, from Guardians to the Suicide Squad, Peacemaker, and while those have their respective differences, it's crazy how when he doesn't do the whole misfits who hate each other but then become a found family thing, it doesn't land as hard. Don't get me wrong, there was definitely a way to pull this kind of thing off, but the team dynamic as a whole wasn't as interesting as his other works in my opinion. Rick Flag Sr. I really enjoyed. They really did do a good job of making him feel unique in comparison to his son, Rick Flag Sr. Instead of him being a 100% no-nonsense stern commander, they kind of just make him a chill dude some of the time, which was neat. He didn't have much of an arc going on this season. All that was there was really just his relationship with Princess Ilana. The age-old tale of a grizzled 50-year-old white-haired man falling for a stunningly beautiful 30-year-old blonde-haired woman and... Okay, look, I don't mean to go all conspiracy theorist on y'all, but I'm not the only one who sees this, right? Like this is too weird to just be a coincidence. Anyway, I think Flag was pretty good this season. Not outstanding, just a decently fun character. I'm mainly looking forward to seeing what he does in Peacemaker Season 2, though. The Bride, for me, is easily the standout character. Her backstory is pretty sad, being someone who's only created to be used to make someone like Eric Frankenstein happy, and spending the last centuries of her life trying to escape the guy. But I mainly love Bride because of how she's just a standoffish, cold-hearted bitch in the best way possible. Her attitude and crude nature was really fun in my opinion, and just seeing her take on a leadership role over the course of the season was very satisfying, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of her. Weasel and G.I. Robot were both pretty decent. With Weasel, this is something I have my nitpicks about when it comes to some of these Suicide Squad type stories, where the bad guys aren't really bad guys, but misunderstood gentle souls. That line in the Suicide Squad where they mentioned Weasel killing 27 children was funny as shit, but has now been turned into a tragic tale where Weasel was trying to save the kids because they were nice to him and played with him earlier in the day. Don't get me wrong, this is very effective and sad as shit, and it works its way into the ongoing narrative very well, but it's really just a nitpick that some of the bad guys on these bad guy teams aren't really bad guys, and it's kind of annoying. G.I. Robot is one of the things I was referring to when I said after you get the character's backstory, they just up and end pretty quickly. For the first few episodes, we see GI's whole thing is being a robot built in World War II who wants nothing but to kill Nazis. Well, we sure could use someone like him right about now. Which was pretty funny how that directive occupies his every waking thought, and you'd think something like that would get pretty old. Okay, well, it almost does, but with his backstory, we learn it's more than just about killing Nazis. Yes, that's his directive, but what killing Nazis means to him is just being back in the good old days with his boys in easy company. And when he's finally able to let loose, you can see the sheer joy on his face, and it's pretty sweet. But then he just up and dies like a few short minutes after we get this whole revelation. And while it works for what it was, I think it would have hit better if we at least got more with GI before that death. And I'm saying death with quotations because they bring the nigga back in the last scene of the show. But like I said, it works just fine, and I think it was smart to have him be the first to die off, as the whole killing Nazis joke would have gotten very old had it gone on for any longer, in my opinion. Dr. Phosphorus was really cool, one of the few members on the team who's just a straight up psychopath. After having his family killed by crime boss Rupert Thorne and tossed into a toxic atomizing machine, he goes batshit insane, kills Thorne along with his wife and kids, and just takes over the dude's empire. Like the bride, Phosphorus is just pretty apathetic to almost anyone and anything around him, and it causes for some pretty funny interactions throughout the show. He's just a really fun character. I don't think there's anything else for me to really say. Nina Mazursky was also another character along with GI Robot that could have been a bit better handled when it came to her overall story. I feel like she should have been pushed a bit more as a protagonist next to the bride and Flag, because her role on the team kinda always felt a bit unclear. Like in episode 1, Waller mentions how she's the smartest of the Commandos, but we never really get a good frame of that until the finale where they detail her backstory. I didn't need her to be some big science tech head, but maybe a little bit of something to push that to the forefront could have been neat. I as well think her relationship with the other team members could have used just a bit more fleshing out. Her friendship with the bride was fun for what it was, but considering that it's one of the main catalysts for some crucial story moments, I personally think we should have gotten a bit more. Because that connection is what makes Bride kill Ilana in the end, saving the day. And while for what it is, it works fine, it's incredibly noticeable just how little of an overall importance she had before she ultimately wound up dead. Other than that stuff, I loved Nina. She's the most sweet and level-headed of the Commandos, and just a delight whenever she's around. Her story is easily the most tragic. Being born with irregularities that seemingly makes it hard for her mother to stick around for her, forcing her father to come up with any means necessary to ensure her survival. This moment I've seen a few people not take liking towards because of Nina's mom, Lily, claiming that she was written to be a bit too harsh and not wanting Nina to live the way she is. But I think they handled it with just a natural amount of nuance. She couldn't bear sticking around to watch her baby suffer what she thinks would be a long and painful death. While it's objectively fucked up, it's also kinda understandable, in my opinion. I don't think they made her overtly evil or uncaring like some folks have been saying. Anyway, from the bullying after her experiment and her dad's eventual death, Nina's story is just tragic as hell. Because she spent her whole life not feeling like she belonged anywhere, and the moment she actually feels like she found camaraderie in her monster comrades, she ends up getting killed for it. Like I said, for what it was certainly effective, but they definitely could have benefited from Nina being a more prevalent character in my opinion. Now on to the villains. Eric fucking Frankenstein, good god. This freaking guy's a whole can of worms. I adored this character for a plethora of reasons. His self-centered and one-track sadistic mind leads to a bunch of really fun moments, but his near childlike mindset and apathetic view of those around him can make him genuinely unsettling at times. This dude is truly a monster in every sense of the word. But the foundation of his character is his infatuation with the bride. This entitled, possessive need to have her was really interesting, because with it, we really see how much of a monster Eric is. Like I mentioned a bit ago, out of all the characters in the show, he is easily the most monstrous. Obviously physically, but also psychologically. Having no respect for Bride's autonomy and willing to stop at nothing to have her was, like I said, really interesting. Even back to their first meeting, he doesn't even care to have her properly learn and develop like him. Showcasing his basic want for her, but not her herself, was done pretty well. And even this turns to jealousy when seeing how close he and their creator, Victor Frankenstein, have gotten. I think it's easy to see that most of Eric's actions over his long existence are absolutely deplorable, but I think one thing we can all agree on is that he was very right to kill Victor. You create this person to be the bride of your theoretical son, meaning she would kind of be your theoretical daughter as well. You teach them all these things and then form a weird connection in this creepy and groomy way. Then to turn around and just start taking her to Pound Town. Like, excuse me? While his wife and kids were literally down the street, mind you. Killing Victor, even if technically for the wrong reasons, was easily the best thing Eric did throughout the entire show, because this level of freaky activity could not be left unchecked. That brings me to another point, that the way they wrapped up this story by the end really could have been better. I feel like we should have gotten a proper confrontation with Eric and the bride. Like, it really feels like the season was building up to a proper confrontation with the two, only to do nothing with it. Like, I love how she's just kill on sight with him, but it really felt disappointing that it kind of went nowhere. And I know I joked about it just a bit ago, but I also would have liked for them to acknowledge the weird-ass relationship with the bride and Victor, because the story presents it like some tragic love tale that Eric ruined with his selfishness. When it takes like 5 seconds of rational thinking to see how gross and weird that little romance was. Anyway, Eric in this show was great. The humor surrounding his childishness was really funny, and his obsession with the bride was just as hilarious as it is unsettling. Cersei was okay. Cersei unfortunately didn't have much character to speak of this season, other than just being evil, and then turning out to not be all that evil. My only frame of reference for this character is that Justice League episode from way back when, and unfortunately, she doesn't have much character to speak of here compared to that, I'd say, which is a shame for one of Wonder Woman's biggest villains. Her incel army, the Sons of Themyscira, is something I find kinda interesting, so to speak, because they are based on an actual group of characters from the comics, being the very literal abandoned Sons of Themyscira, and I can't help but feel that would have been more interesting to pull from. Don't get me wrong, the incel army was funny, but I can't help but feel that with a concept like that, it would have been more interesting by comparison. I hear from some folks that this particular storyline in the comics isn't that good, but I'm honestly open to the idea of them trying it out in another form, because that's just too interesting of a concept to not revisit in some way. Clayface was there. He really wasn't a big villain, but I'm honestly not a fan of him being a kind of douchey dude, bro, with how he personifies Professor McPherson. Clayface typically would be all in with whatever role he's taking on or person he's impersonating. So having him go out of his way to not be like McPherson was such an odd choice. I know it's a pretty minor thing for such a small appearance, but it's just something I'm not really fond of. In regards to her and Clayface, I just love how much Gunn likes to underpower villains in his projects, because these two are usually busted as shit, but they both got taken out relatively easily. Especially Clayface, as after he's defeated, you'd expect him to come back like he always does. But no, he's just fucking dead. Princess Ilana is easily the worst character James Gunn has ever written, purely because she's such a non-character. She has no interesting personality, no interesting motivations, no nothing. The plot tries to shroud her in so much mystery, they forget to give her an actual character, or even explain a lot of the shit surrounding her. Why does she want to cause World War III? How could she become powerful enough to kill all the world's heroes? How did she get in contact with Clayface if Pokolistan just recently opened up to the rest of the world? How did she know Cersei could see the future where she took over the world? This one is crucial because it literally sets the latter series of events into motion, and based on their minimal interactions, it never seemed like she knew why Cersei was after her in the first place. And I know in the finale where Bride is doing her whole Benoit Blanc spiel, she mentions one of Ilana's knights following them, which would in turn lead to them learning about McPherson, which would also in turn lead to Ilana teaming up with Clayface. But nowhere is it mentioned when or how Ilana found out Cersei was claiming she was evil. And keep in mind, I'm actively looking back through these episodes while I'm recording this, so unless I'm being a giant fucking idiot, this is a pretty big hole in the show's story. These are all questions that don't get answered for the sake of an over-convoluted mystery. Her character is just so weird, because she'll just do weird and shady shit for the sake of doing weird and shady shit. In the finale, where she knows the Commandos are plotting to kill her, she decides to go out for a swim in the pond. For some fucking reason. The actual reason is they need a reason for her to be in the water for Nina to try and kill her. But her in-universe reasoning makes no damn sense, being that she doesn't want to show weakness to her citizens. Even though there's literally no one else but the guards present. Yeah, Ilana is just an incredibly underbaked villain and a shitty non-character as well. The character writing as a whole is decent. The voice acting was really solid in this show. Frank Grillo was really good as Flag Sr., Indira Varma absolutely fucking killed it as the bride. Zoe Chow as well was really good as Nina. Sean Gunn was pretty good as G.I. Robot and Weasel, I guess. Maria Baklova did an outstanding job as Ilana. Alan Tudyk was great as Dr. Phosphorus, as well as the other three fucking characters he voiced. But David Harbour as Eric Frankenstein is easily the biggest standout for me. The way he delivers those super slow, somber, and sadistic tones was really good. Anya, I am so sorry if I butchered these names, by the way. Kalotra, God fucking damn it. Anya Kalotra did a decent job with Cersei, and Viola Davis did a great job with Amanda Waller. All around, the voice cast was just incredible. Gunn mentioned his plan for the DCU includes having the VAs for animated characters reprise their roles in live-action form, so I'm looking forward to seeing some of these guys return in the future. The animation and art style in this show was absolutely incredible. I know the joke recently has been to look at a beautifully animated comic book property like X-Men 97 or this show in particular, and look at stuff like Invincible with a bit of disappointment. But I'm honestly bringing this a little bit closer to home and say y'all niggas should be giving this energy to Batman Caped Crusader. A show on the same streaming platform as Invincible, but with considerably weaker animation and art direction. I really love the amount of shading and detail they added to a lot of the characters and backgrounds and stuff. The lighting in a lot of these shots look absolutely incredible as well. The fight choreography as well is absolutely incredible. They're all so chaotic and dynamic. The stuff with Clayface was really freaking cool. The fight with Flag and Phosphorus was sick as hell. Hell, anything regarding Dr. Phosphorus and his powers just look cool as shit. There are a lot of shots that look really smooth and fluid. Stuff that you wouldn't expect and wouldn't be entirely necessary, I feel, but is still really pleasing to the eyes. Like with his past DC projects, this show has a fuck ton of bloody goodness for all the sickos like me who enjoys that kind of thing in comic book media. Yeah, I don't know what else to say, honestly. The animation just looks really good. The soundtrack is interesting. In typical James Gunn fashion, you can expect a pretty catchy soundtrack to go along with one of his projects, and Creature Commandos isn't any different. But in my opinion, this is the one project where the songs and needle drops feel the most awkward. The song choices themselves are pretty good. I like how the show has a very, for lack of a better term, foreign sound compared to his other projects. With the show being set in a place like Pekolistan, you can see Gunn tried to aim for a few songs that kind of fit that vibe and theme. And you got some pretty good ones with the likes of Firewater and Gogol Bordello sprinkled throughout the show, which is pretty neat. But I think the actual needle drops in the show don't hit as hard, or at least feel just a bit awkward. You'll have a scene that depicts the bride's tragic backstory, and not even a minute later, it'll jump into a chaotic and comedic montage of Eric stalking her throughout the centuries. And it's kinda jarring, and stuff like that is kinda spread throughout the series. It's not bad, but really could have been handled a bit better. Overall, Creature Commandos as a show is just good. That's it. It's just decent, you know? Like I said, definitely Gunn's weakest project, but that's pretty damn far from bad. It has incredible animation, brilliant voice acting, and stellar action scenes. Pretty decent character writing and getting you emotionally attached to said characters, and a relatively decent soundtrack, but is held back by an over-convoluted and frankly boring plot, very awkward utilization of certain characters, as well as awkwardly handled character arcs in general. While the soundtrack was good, some of the needle drops felt a bit poorly handled, and as a whole, the show really didn't land as hard as it could have, in my opinion. Yeah, Creature Commandos is just okay. So, with all that said, if you agree or disagree with anything I've said in this video, let me know right down there in the comments below. Also, be sure to like and subscribe. This has been Darion GNB here, and take care.